So our next speaker that we have coming up is we're taking a different turn from sewage and wastewater, and we are heading to the world of photography. So we have Pedro Peloso, who is an award-winning field biologist and wildlife photographer for a passion for wildlife and wild places. He, through his work, has helped discover and help name over 30 new species of animals, most of which are part of the Amazonian frog. So hopefully, I think we might see a couple of pictures of some of those. Pedro is also the founder and director of the Documenting Threatened Species Project, which is a bold initiative that combines science, art, and storytelling to promote conservation of endangered amphibian species in Brazil specifically. So I think today we're going to hear some of the stories and images of just that, what he's doing to help document and protect biodiversity in the rainforests of Brazil. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Pedro. Hello, Pedro.
Thank you, Lizzie. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you loud and
Perfect.
clear.
Awesome.
Welcome to the Global BioFest.
Thanks for inviting me. You and
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you today and to see some of your work and learn a little bit more about what you do.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I am ready. Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna go ahead and pull in your presentation and I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. Awesome. So thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And as you said, I am a researcher and a conservation photographist. So it's good that in some expeditions I get to be a biologist with a camera, but in some other expeditions I am a photographer with a background in biology, and that helps me a lot to understand the animals and to photograph them in different ways and get to know their behavior a little better. So I try to do a sweep throughout my career, and I'll try to do that very fast because it's almost 20 years working on tropical forests, and this is where I started. So I've traveled mostly throughout South America, but also Southeast Asia, and these are some of the places that I've been to: Atlantic forest, isolated islands in the Atlantic Ocean, the high Andes, where the Amazon actually starts, the first forest of the Amazon in the eastern slope of the Andes. But my biggest passion is actually the Amazon, and I've worked in the Amazon for about 15 years-ish, a little bit less than that. But that's where I've concentrated most of my effort. And throughout these expeditions, I've had really close encounters with a lot of very cool and rare and endangered animals. And this is one very good example where I go after the animals and try to be in a place where I can get photographs, such as this one of this Andean bear, the only bear species in South America that's now endangered with extinction. My initial passion was with reptiles. I wanted to work with reptiles, but at some point in my career, I switched over to frogs. But and more, I got interested in showing different angles and different images of rare animals. So this is a very rare pit viper, only known from a single island in Brazil. This is another example where I put myself in situations and in places where I can get photographs of very, very rare animals. So this is the world's rarest toucan. It's only known from very few localities in Peru. It's highly endangered. There are very, very few pictures of these toucan available in the internet, and I was able to spend a couple days with it in Peru. And because I always had a camera and I share some of my images in meetings and in talks and in social media, I've learned that depending on the picture and depending on the story you attach to that picture, you can really grab the attention of people to the animal or to the situation and stuff like that. So I've been using my photography to actually highlight the animals and highlight these conservation stories or research discoveries and stuff like that. But as you said, most of my work is concentrated with amphibians, and that is now my biggest passion. So there are around 8,500 species of amphibians in the world, many different forms, colors. There are all sorts of varieties of amphibians. Most of the amphibians are frogs. In South America, we have very few species of salamanders. I'm sure in Europe and North America, there are lots of them. But I've been traveling a lot and enough so I can see all of this diversity of amphibians. And what I get to do now is just share these images with people so that people know about this diversity. Because if I just say there's 8,000 different species, that's only a number. But if I attach pictures and different pictures of these animals, and then people can start to relate with these animals a little bit more. And even like very common species like a common toad, if I show it in a different angle with different lighting, so it brings a different sense of beauty to these animals, and people can start to care about them a little bit more. I try to also document behavior, so this is useful for research. Many colleagues have used my photos and my images for research in natural history and ecology and taxonomy as well. And I'm lucky because I am in Brazil. So there are over 1,000 species of amphibians in Brazil, which means that sort of like 1 out of every 8 species occur in Brazil, and that's the most in the world. Roughly, we have 4 times more species of amphibians in Brazil than we have in the whole United States. So that's a huge diversity, and that's also a lot of opportunities. And I've been photographing and documenting these animals for quite a while, and I have collected images of very cool animals. And there are some species in Brazil that are very unique and that people do not know about. This is a very cool example. This is the only species of amphibian that relies on vegetables for a huge part of its life. So it actually eats fruits. So for part of the year when insects are not that abundant and there are these like tiny red fruits that are available, this animal eats fruits. So that's the only known amphibian that eats fruits for as a primary source of its energy for a big part of the year. This is another very cool animal, and it's allegedly capable of injecting venom into predators or prey. It has never been observed in nature, but it has all the mechanisms to be able to do that. Sort of like a venomous spider, venomous snake, but in a very different mechanism. So all amphibians have venoms in their skins, but this one is highly toxic, and it does have a mechanism to actually inject that venom. And this is known only from a Brazilian species. But the thing is, working on a very diverse environment means that a lot of it is still unknown. So there was actually a recent estimate that about 50% of all amphibians may still be unnamed, which means these are species that are not yet fully recognized by science. And this has a lot of implications that I will explain a little bit down the line. And that same paper that brought out this estimate, they pointed out some places where most of the future species are likely to be discovered. And Brazil is like this huge place with tons of species to still be discovered in the future. And as you said in the introduction, I was lucky, and I've been working with several colleagues, and I have participated, either led or collaborated in the description of over 30 new species of animals, mostly frogs, but also some lizards, most recently a bird. And you will hear about a praying mantis, I think, tomorrow, and that we're collaborating on that too. So that's a lot of animals. And this is just some of the examples. This is a tiny frog from the Amazon that we named after our colleagues, the Kayapó indigenous people in southern Amazonia. This is a tree frog that we named after Ozzy Osbourne, the famous musician, because it has a very high-pitched vocalization that remembers a bat, and there's the whole story about Ozzy Osbourne biting the head of a bat, and that's the association there. And this is the most beautiful frog I've seen in Brazil, and this was also a new species that we named after a mythological character in Brazil, the Mapinguari, and it probably is the legend of the Mapinguari is probably based on very ancient sightings of giant sloths. And that's a big legend in the Amazon, and that frog is from the Amazon, so we just associated the name. So we can get pretty creative with species names. But the one of the main issues and things about taxonomy is that all of that takes a lot of time. So on average, it takes 20 years between the time a species is discovered and when it gets its actual name. So that estimate, let's say we know that 50% of all diversity of frogs is still unnamed. And if we started now, it would take probably 20 years to name all of that. And the reasons is that many of these species require a lot of work to be described and named. So some of them we can do it only by morphology if they're very distinct, but for some of these species we need additional work like anatomical work or comparing vocalizations or doing genetic studies. And we all know that a lot can happen in 20 years. So I'll just show a few pictures of complete destruction of natural environments. This is in the arc of deforestation in the Amazon. That's a lot of deforestation, and the border there, the river there is the limit of an indigenous territory. This is this deforestation in the Atlantic forest, same situation, forest is gone. This is illegal gold mining in southern Amazonia as well, near that other photo of the indigenous territory. This is salt mining on the coast, so a lot of the coastal species are also threatened because of this and because of expansion of urban areas. Mining on mountains. On top of that mountain, there's a species that lives only on the top of these mountains, and its habitat is being reduced. And the Amazon is now being reduced to these small islands. So I'll show you another example of a species we discovered and just recently named, which is Adenomera phonotrichus from southern Amazonia. This is where the species was discovered, and if you look at the arrow in the center of the image, that's the patch of forest where we found that frog. But that was the forest 30 years ago when I was born in 1985, and this is how the forest looks now. So it's pretty easy to see that most of the habitat of that species is gone, and it's very likely that this species will be listed as endangered with extinction in the very near future. So the biggest message that I want to live now with you is that we are losing species before we get to know them, and this is a fact, because if it takes on average 20 years for us to know to name these species, it means that we can take too long, and in 20 years we can have a whole lot of forests destroyed. And if these species have very narrow distributions, and it is the case with many of these species in Brazil, they have like only known from a very narrow patch of forest or a single locality, we are going to lose these species. And frogs are amphibians in general are a lot more sensitive than other animals. 40% of all the amphibians are threatened with extinction in some level. And just to be clear here, what I'm talking about threatened is what the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, use these categories. And we can have species that are not endangered, not threatened, or they're extinct, or they're in these three different categories that that scientists use to categorize them. I'm sure most of you know this, but some people may not. So these are the main categories of endangered species. We currently have only 42 species included in the Brazilian red list based on those criteria. So we have 41 threatened species, one that is officially considered extinct, and at least 167 species, that's almost 200 species that we don't even have enough data to know if they're threatened or not. And that's a problem because a lot of these data deficient species are also endangered. There's a very good correlation that these species are going to be endangered. And these numbers are certainly outdated. So the new list that should have been published already, but the government is taking too much to approve and to publish this list. The list has been done since 2018. There are at least 15 species that are possibly extinct. And the list of endangered is a lot bigger than these 42 that are officially protected by law. So that's how I envisioned and created the Documenting Threatened Species project, which is this project that I'm involved now that pretty much combines all of this background that I have in amphibian biology and photography. So I created a project, and our idea is to go to all the places where these endangered species are and have them documented in photos and videos and study them and document the threats to these species and so on and so forth. And so far, we have conducted 8 expeditions, and this is sort of how they're distributed in Brazil. And you all know that Brazil is huge. So getting a project and getting all the money and time to go and look for all these species is a huge and monumental effort. But we've already conducted 8 expeditions and documented 14 species, 14 or 15. I forgot the exact number, but it's a lot of species. And I'll just quickly show some of these pictures. And these are all very rare, highly endangered animals. This is critically endangered. This is one of the rarest species in Brazil. It's only known from a single river, a single small river in a single island in the Atlantic, and it's a very rare species. It's very highly endangered. This is another critically endangered species, also only known from a single river. This one in southern Brazil, and you can see the river is there, and there's a little bit of forest, and the species is there, but you can see there's already deforestation in the middle of the area there. And this is an example of how this all sums up a little bit of my career and how I got involved with all of this. So this is a species I discovered when I was an undergrad student in Brazil in 2005. And it took a while for us to name it. It didn't take the whole 20 years, but it almost took a decade for us to be able to actually describe and name it. And we named it in 2012. And in 2014, it was already included in the Brazilian list as critically endangered with extinction. Just a few more examples, and these are all images that we collected for this project. All very rare. There are very few images available of all these species. So that's another thing. We're starting to work with conservation. I would Google and look for images of these species, and there were none or very few good images that we can use in books and publications. So that was one of the drives that I had to go to the field and photograph all these species. And in addition to just photographing and having this database of images, we're also doing a lot of stuff. When we go there, we do some research. So we take swabs, we look for infectious diseases, and we have students that are working on different species that we already documented. We do a lot of communication. So there's a lot of press. There's a lot of press that people do on our project. We write small articles, and we also write op-eds and stuff like that to actually put out the images. And now these new images, these creative artistic images, are associated with stories, and we've been able to highlight a little bit more about this species. And one of the coolest aspects of the project is that we're partnering with artists to have a bigger conservation impact. So the two on the right there with Bia Mauricio and Bioma Conservation, we're actually having products that when we sell these products, some of the money is converted either to the DOTS project, my project, or directly to people and scientists working with a particular species. And one final very important aspect of what we're doing is education. So we try to, as much as possible, get especially kids involved. So we have people going to schools and giving talks and getting kids involved. We've promoted BioBlitzes, and I've getting dots involved in many different aspects of education in general. And we're partnering. There's a lot of cool stuff that's probably going to come out this second semester of the year and next year, including books and musics and stuff like that. But that's all a surprise, and it'll come out soon enough. And the reason I do this is so that I can come back to the Amazon and have these frogs protected, and I need the environment to be there for our future generations. With that, I end my participation, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Pedro. That was really beautiful to see so many of your images, and just amazing. I can see exactly why you've fallen in love with the frogs as well as the other amphibians as well. There's a question that has come in on the chat for you that I also was wondering, especially when you can see on just on your finger some of the super small frogs around the Brazilian coin, how small that frog was. So the question is, how do you find these tiny frogs? It must be really hard to spot them when you're within their surroundings. So how do you actually find them?
It's different for every frog. Well, it's different for every frog, but a lot of them we hear them. So I've been literally frustrated for 3-4 hours hearing something, and I know it's there, and it just basically. Most of these animals are there at night, so it's very old-fashioned flashlight looking for them. But when they're calling is a lot easier because you know they're there. But it's also frustrating when you don't find them. And many times you're looking down and they're up, or you're looking on the leaf litter and they're burrowed inside soil and stuff like that. But every frog is different. And the tiny ones, you just need to like kneel and just search for them for maybe a couple hours, and you'll eventually find one.
You must really love searching in the leaf litter.
Oh yeah, I love it. Yeah. And you find bugs, and you find cockroaches and spiders, and you find all kinds of cool animals too.
Yeah, so it's not just the frogs. Another question that came in from our Instagram feed is there a frog species that you really want to see but you haven't yet? And if so, what does it look like?
There are a few. So there are these marsupial frogs that carry the babies on their backs, and I know where they are. I've been to an area where they were there, but I never got to see them in the wild. So these marsupial frogs with actually carrying babies. I've seen them carrying the eggs, and I've seen the males and females, but not with the babies. But I want to see those with the babies. That's the one I'm missing. A lot of these frogs for the DOTS projects, a lot of these are frogs that I've wanted to see for a long, long time. Like the one that ate fruits. This was on my list for years, and then this project allowed me to go there and actually see that. So that's a quite cool aspect of this project too.
And how many people are working with you on your project? So I know you said you have had 8 expeditions so far, but how many people actually go out into the field with you?
It also varies a lot. So the core team of the DOTS project is around 8 people. Some people are on and off more involved. 3 of us are always involved since the inception of the project. But I go in all of the expeditions when we're searching for a frog for the first time or doing the actual documentation and photos. But For example, we have a team working on the monitoring of one of these species in the Cerrado. So there's like 5 or 6 people involved in just that aspect of the project. And whenever I want to go, let's say I'll do an expedition in December and I want to see one frog. So I'll contact people there, local people, and say, how many people can we bring? How much budget do we have? So it varies a lot. So we can have like 2 people up to 10 people. We've had an expedition to one island where we were, I think, 8 people. And all of these expeditions have somebody that's already working with the frog. So I don't want to just go there. Oh, I'm the photographer. I'm going to go there, find it by myself and photograph. Because one of the things I want to do too is highlight people that are already working with these animals. But it varies. It varies from very few to as much as we can allow to bring in the car or boat or the budget allows for.
And how long do you usually spend in the field? If you're spending hours looking for a tiny frog, is it a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months?
Yeah, we can have long conversations about how crazy these expeditions for this project are. So the first expedition it was pretty much a tryout that we had the idea. We didn't know. We don't know if this is going to work or not. So we planned to see 5 species, 5 different localities in 4 days. And it was crazy. Just like drive, try to find the species, photos, and then drive, and do the same thing for 5 days. We were exhausted by the end of it, but it was nice. And we didn't have money because we didn't have. Now we have money for some expeditions. Now it's getting better, but the first ones were just sleeping in very bad hotels or in other people's couches and stuff. But we usually plan now. We plan for 2 days per species.
Oh wow!
Because the thing with these species is that they're endangered, but people know they're there. So it's not that they are rare where they occur. They is that they only occur in 1 or 2 places. But usually because they're endangered, people know where they are. There's at least 1 or 2 people already working there. So that's why I contact the specialist and I say, no, it's in this creek. This is the GPS coordinates. We just have to go there and look, we're going to find. And for the documentation aspect of it, we just need 1 individual. If we find 1 individual, we can do magic and have like 100 photos and videos and whatever we can from that 1 frog. So we plan for 2 days, but we usually have multiple species per trip. So if we find it in the first day, cool, we can have 3 days for the next. And that's how we sort of roll. Unless it's like a very remote place that we have to plan a little bit more. So we went to that island where that species is in the island. So we were there for 4 days because we had to guarantee, because it's a lot more money to go there and we have to have success in that single trip. Some of these places we can come back and stuff.
Yeah. You have a lot of shout outs on our YouTube channel of how wonderful your work is, the beautifulness of your images, and just wishing you strength to continue your project in the current Brazilian science situation. And there's another question, and I might pronounce the name of this fungus wrong, so please forgive me. But the question is, has the citrid fungus or DB affected most species in the Amazon, and also have the scientists managed to control it?
So BD is not as common in the Amazon, and it's actually more problematic in the Atlantic forest, and there is solid evidence that some of these species that probably are extinct were killed by the fungus. So that's a problem. And one of the things that we do is whatever place we go, we try to swab and see if the fungus is there. So far, we haven't had a lot of species with the fungus, but some, yes. But it seems like some species can handle it and they're stable, even if they're infected. But there are some species that are probably gone, and it was because of that. That was like some decades ago, but they're gone now. It's too late. So this is an aspect that we're dealing with. Yeah.
And on your website, just to give us a quick overview of the website, if we go to visit your website, A, can you tell us what the name is so we can search it later? And then what will we find both your beautiful images as well as the research you've conducted and what your maybe places you're hoping to go next?
Yeah, so my website is my name altogether, pedropeloso.com. And there you'll find a mixture of a lot of things from research. You can download all the papers that I've been involved. I've been trying to upload it more things and update it, but mostly research, some photos, some curiosities, all the people that work with me, like students. I have a bunch of graduate students that are amazing. They do most of the hard work now that I've done in the past. They do it now. And there's a link to the Documenting Threatened Species project that is a bigger independent website where you can find more like direct details on the endangered species and more photos about them. But not all the information is there. We're renewing the website and uploading all the photos, but we have 10 to 12 species already there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pedro. This was wonderful to have you be part of the Global BioFest and learn more about amphibians in Brazil, specifically the frogs, and that we need to find even more and try and protect them all. So
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing all of your beautiful work and research with us today.
Thank you, Lizzie, very, very much. And thank you, Joe. This is an amazing festival. I'm looking forward for all the talks for today, tomorrow, and the day after that.